Chuck DeVore. He is running for the Republican nomination to face Barbara Boxer. And this fall's election, he joins us here on KOGO. Hiya, Chuck. Good morning.
Good morning.
You've worked in the Assembly before, and this is what drives me crazy about what's going on there. 360 bills in 4 days that they're going to fly through. And some important stuff in there, too. Stuff like California's, they may limit whether or not a city can file bankruptcy. They've stuck their nose in the passenger Bill of Rights kind of craziness. And then, you know, the one that really kills me is the one that comes from San Francisco, where they don't want to count a juvenile's violent crime against 3 strikes. But, you know, look at the second 2 crimes. That ought to be enough to keep them there a long time. It's frustrating. As a member of the U.S. Senate, you'd be in the same position. How do you change that sort of institutionalized thinking?
Well, it's very difficult, as you rightly skewered some of the folks that hadn't read the Arizona law. I think that what's really going on here is government has gotten so large and so powerful and so complex that it is constantly unbalancing the economy. It's constantly causing unintended consequences, and as a result, we need a myriad of new laws to fix the problems that government caused in the first place. And that's, I believe, what's going on right now. All of these laws are really more of a symptom of big government and liberals' desire to make it even bigger and tinker with our lives. So I think that part of the way you fight it is by voting no a lot, by calling people out on this, by standing up and refusing to be part of the game. You know, just saying, look, what are we trying to do here? How is this constitutional?
Well, that's the thing about, you know, that when people say we live in a democracy, I always correct them and say, it's a democratic republic, and it's very different. Democracy is mob rule. You know, we elect people like yourself to go to Sacramento or Washington, and we have put trust in you. And I feel when that trust is violated, it is one of the greatest. Well, to me, it dishonors the whole system. It dishonors the public officials, the people, and the republic. And you see it time and time again, and it's done with almost a cavalier attitude.
Well, I think it is. I think you hit it right on the head. A cavalier attitude. The people are kind of secondary. The special interests, the unions, those are the folks that really matter.
Right.
With the folks in the system. One of the things that I've always gotten a kick out of is I've often been criticized in Sacramento as being a fairly meager fundraiser, when in fact, if you look at the funds that I do raise for political purposes, most come from Orange County, from my base, and very, very little has ever come from the political action committees. And that's one of the reasons why I've been labeled a mediocre fundraiser. And I look at it and I think, well,
it's a compliment.
If you're a Sacramento special interest, of course you're not going to give me very much money because I'm not for sale. And furthermore, I don't believe government should be doing the majority of what it's doing these days.
Did you see, by the way, speaking of which, did you see the front page of the UT yesterday?
No, I didn't.
They had the money that people are spending on their campaigns here. Steve Poizner, who'll be with us tomorrow, by the way, $24 million of his own money. Meg Whitman, $68 million. I mean, I'm pretty sure when the system was devised that nobody thought that would ever happen, that people, I mean, that's buying a seat, is straight out, either one of those guys. And it's very frustrating.
Well, and look at the pile of money being saved up by Jerry Brown on the other side,
right.
Almost all of which is coming, again, from public sector employee unions. And is that really a shock, given that in the 1970s he was the one that allowed civil servants to unionize for the first time in California?
Oh, you look at the problems we have now. They go right to the feet of Jerry Brown's first term. I mean, really, they do. And they go back and I don't know, you can go back to Roosevelt and start to see the socialization of this country, but the truth is that the answers all are on the private side. The problems, and BP is a good example of one where, the private side's not perfect, and they will pay for that. They will pay for that to the tune of billions of dollars. But you have a situation here in this country, a real opportunity for the private sector to make inroads, but they're up against the kind of propaganda in the media and from politicians that I've never heard before. It's unbelievable, the demonization of good Americans who are running small businesses across this country and the larger businesses who are successful. Walmart's a great example,
Well, I think the small businesses especially, because that's, of course, where most of the jobs are created. Big business often creates its own problems, so vis-a-vis government, because you end up with crony capitalism where big business attempts to use its influence with policymakers to rent-seek so that they can gouge out exceptions or regulations or a tax structure that advantage them.
Well, that's where
competitors.
So that's where I go back to character. With people that we elect. I mean, there are obviously their influence is great and it's legal. As long as it's not quid pro quo, as long as it's not straight out bribery, Randy Dukish. As long as it's straight up. Look, this is what we'd like you to do. A lot of times, and you know this as an elected official, you'll learn something from a big organization. That's a solid thing to do. It's the right thing to do. It's not always because they're a large company that it's bad. It can be something that's good. It's nothing wrong with lobbying. It's when the results work against the interests of the people that elected you, then it's wrong.
And again, I think it's important to understand that lobbying has grown along with the power and size of government. As government has become more intrusive, as government decisions have become more vital to jobs and industry, then the amount spent on lobbying has had to increase, both for defensive purposes, so you could even stay in business, and really for offensive purposes, so that you could try to manipulate the levers of government to help yourself at the expense of your competitors. So, we see both. A classic example in Sacramento are the scope of practice wars that happen constantly, where, for example, surgeons versus podiatrists, on exactly what can you operate on a foot, or ophthalmologists versus optometrists over exactly what can be done with the eye, or nurses versus doctors over who can administer an inoculation or something without a doctor's oversight. These sorts of things are routine in Sacramento because we proscribe every aspect of life out of Sacramento and out of Washington, D.C., which then leads to people having a very keen interest in shaping government to do one thing or another.
And it's not always the most accurate voice that gets heard. It's sometimes just the loudest or the best funded, and that's not good for people either.
Absolutely, and that's where things get frustrating when you have served in the legislature as I have, and you begin to see some of these votes and how they're shaped, and you know that it has more to do with campaign contributions than it does with common sense in many cases. And your only hope is the fact that you're always just one election away from fixing the problem and having people undo what they just did.
Okay, I got to ask you a question here. It's 7:45 here on AM 600 KOGO. We're speaking with Chuck DeVore, who was running for the Republican nomination here in California. If for some reason you don't win this, would you consider running as a third-party candidate with, like, the Tea Party's backing? Because I think the Tea Party's very uninterested in Steve Poizner and Meg Whitman. I'm sorry, and Carly and Tom Campbell. And would you be interested possibly in running as a third-party candidate?
Well, not particularly, because I think that would definitely hand the election to Barbara Boxer. When you look at third-party dynamics in America, where we really have a winner-take-all system rather than the proportional parliamentary system that is predominant in Europe, what you see, throughout our history is very, very few times have third parties ever won. In fact, I think one of the last great alignments was when the Republican Party itself was a third party and essentially eliminated the Whig Party within just 2 election cycles. But that was because a realignment was going on.
But then it seemed like that. I mean, we've had moments, going back to Anderson in '76 and going through, or maybe it was '80, and then looking at Perot and Nader, and there've been some times. Granted, but I think there's a large segment, and I don't know if it's here in California, that want their voice heard, and they look at this 2-party system, and they go to Washington, they become Republicrats, and you say to yourself, I'm a conservative business person. I work hard. I want protection. I'm not getting it. Maybe a sacrifice along the way is what has to happen. I know Barbara Boxer is a huge sacrifice.
Right. No, yes, she is. Look, I look at it this way. Barbara Boxer is now that Barack Obama is in the White House, is more or less considered the most liberal member of the U.S. Senate. I intend to win the Republican nomination on June 8th. I have a large number of volunteers. and I intend to work hard to retire Barbara Boxer in November of this year. I think that the Tea Party movement is going to be around for a while. I believe that they are a force for accountability to try to ensure that politicians actually follow through on their promises. And in that regard, I see them, kind of coexisting in the existing political structure for quite some time, because so many politicians don't follow through on their campaign promises, and that's where I see.
Well, hopefully they can replace the Republicans that are still spending, and that would then get that party back to where they used to be.
That's the key thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, Chuck, great talking to you. I wish you best of luck here in this last week of campaigning.
So much.
Okay, thank you.
ChuckDeVore.com.
All right, buddy. ChuckDeVore.com. We'll post that. See you now.